The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of ParaX, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Step outside of your comfort zone. See the world with a whole new perspective. Join us and experience the unexplained on the Paranormal View.
And welcome everybody right here to the Paranormal View on the ParaX Radio Network. I want to thank everyone for being with us tonight, those in the chat room and those listening from around the world. And if you have questions tonight, which I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of questions tonight, you can private chat them to either H. Foister or Ceiling Cat, and we will get those answered for you as soon as possible. And if you're listening from somewhere else other than here in the chat room and you have questions, you can send it to theparanormalview@gmail.com, and we will get those answered also. Tonight, we've got a great guest lined up, and we have with us Barbara Duncan.
Hello, everybody.
And we have Jeffrey Gould.
Hello, hello.
And I am going to really try and promise that we're not going to have a mishap this week like we had last week. I have everything reconfigured where nothing will be in my way if I have to get up.
And you can't even blame me. I was disconnected at that point during that. I came back. I'm like, what has hit the fan here?
Tim, table tipping.
So, I guess, Barbara, because we do have a great guest, do you have her bio?
No, but I know Jeff does.
Jeff, you got her bio?
Really do.
All right. Would you like to introduce our guest then?
Absolutely. I don't know where that came from. So anyway, let's get up here. So tonight's returning guest is psychic medium Gypsy Moon. In her young childhood over various domiciles, she's experienced astral projection, came into contact with a solid apparition. She's lived on a Wisconsin on a haunted farm with very many different friendly good spirits with whom she enjoyed interacting. Gypsy found herself giving readings in everyday conversations, providing spiritual understanding and advice. As a spirit medium and paranormal investigator, Gypsy Moon participates in paranormal events nationwide as a guest speaker, and paranormal investigator. She does private readings and welcomes every opportunity with which to communicate with the spirit realm with the intent of bringing hope, peace, and understanding to all interested. So welcome back, Gypsy Moon.
Thank you so much.
Now, as Jeff was also reading your bio, which a lot of it I have written down to start with, and you started out at an early age. You had an experience at the age of 2. You experienced astral projection. How did that happen, or what happened with it? Did you realize what was going on?
At the time, no, of course. I mean, I was only 2 years old. And my mother was actually in an apartment, cleaning it, getting it ready for us to move into. So she had left me with my great-grandmother for the evening, and Grandma was babysitting. She had tucked me into bed, and I was missing and wanting my mother. So I just went to her wherever she was. It wasn't like I had any idea other than I was looking for her soul or her spirit, wanting to be close to her. And my mother, who was also a psychic, it ultimately ended up being a shared experience, because as she was sitting there on the floor, scrubbing the floor, she looked up to watch me walk through the door and into her arms. Later in life, when I got a little bit older and could communicate better, I discussed the experience with her, and I remembered everything about the apartment, the floor plan, and, things about the inside, the interior of it. And she was kind of mystified by that, because she had thought that it was her experience, not one that we necessarily shared together on a conscious level, because she understood that there was no way possible for me to have remembered even living there at 2 years old. And we'd only lived there a short time, like 6 months or something, So I think that's kind of, was one of the most profound experiences at that early of an age. The grandmother that she had left me with was a nurse who used to do hospice in her home. So there was a lot of paranormal activity in the house itself growing up. So that kind of led to more experiences later on down the road. But the astral projection to my mother was the first of memory that I can recall.
So when you did that, how long, like, were you there and just hugged her and then you was back home?
Yeah.
Just like that?
Yeah, it was brief. Just needed a hug, before I went to bed.
Have you done astral projection before? I mean, since, rather?
Oh, since, yes, absolutely. I thoroughly enjoy it.
Really?
I've actually, and I can't say that it's, it works exactly the way I want it to every time, because it's really kind of done on more of a subliminal way, but there are ways that I have been able to control it, and I have been able to astral project to people and have them have shared experiences with me, which to me is, incredible. I really like doing that. There was a time where I was afraid to astral project because I was young and probably in like my teen years. I was afraid that if I left my body, maybe something else would slip in, and then when I came back, I wouldn't be able to get in, But my mom explained to me that, it doesn't really work that way, and that it's, a safe passage, and there's ways to protect yourself. So with her encouragement, I learned to, really enjoy the adventure and the experience of it.
Well, later on, you moved to a farmhouse, and at the age of 5, you seen your first solid apparition.
Yeah.
What took place with that?
Well, at the age of...
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it was before we moved to the farmhouse in Wisconsin. We were living out in Colorado Springs, actually. And that was a shared experience as well. There was me and 2 other children were playing in an open field that laid between our houses. And we found a little sandy area by this big boulder, and we were digging in the sand, like how kids bend over and they dig and you kick up the sand between your legs behind you. Mm-hmm. And we were digging for gold. That's what we were saying. Let's find the gold. The gold is here. Let's dig for gold. We were all excited. And while we were digging, an arrow shot into the sand in the middle of us. And it startled us. So we looked up and we saw 2 Native Americans. One was in full headdress and the other was a scout. And they were just staring at us. Well, the two of my friends, they ran home screaming. They were terrified and went home and told their parents. Well, I was a little bit more mischief than that. I was upset that they ruined my good time. So I went looking for them. And I'm like, because I thought they were like being bullies trying to scare us away. So, but when I turned around to look back at them, they were gone. And they were actually solid apparitions. And at that time, I didn't recognize them as being a ghost. Okay? The ghosts that I had seen up until that point in my life were more translucent. You could see through them. They weren't solid like you and me. And these natives were solid like you and I. So at that point in time, I went home and I followed the creek bed home, thinking I'd find their footprints or something, but they were gone. And the field was wide open. You could see all the way across it in any direction. So there was really nowhere for them to hide. And when I got home, my mom was on the phone with my friend's parents listening to the story for the second time about what happened. And so, of course, she said, sounds like you had an eventful day. What happened? So, I told her what happened. And, at that point in time, and it might sound unusual, but I kind of had an unusual upbringing. my mom and I sat there and discussed time travel because we're like, maybe that's what it was. Maybe it was like some kind of hiccup or interdimensional crossing, or, you know, something happened there. And we didn't really turn to the ghostly paranormal again because they were solid. Well, later, when we moved to the farmhouse in Wisconsin and I started dealing with the solid apparitions that were there, was finally when I was like, oh, okay. So the Indians in Colorado were ghosts. You know, it was like solving the mystery with more mystery.
Now,
And everybody saw the arrow?
Everybody saw what?
The arrow?
Yeah, the arrow. Yeah, and yeah, I know. And the common question is, did you grab the arrow? And sadly, no.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at 5 years old, I just didn't think to grab it. You know, it was a sharp object that scared my friends away. I was more interested in the bullies that were shooting it. You know, but no, I sure wish I would have grabbed that arrow if it was even truly there. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, but it was when we were there.
Okay.
So it was a very interesting experience, which actually led to more interesting paranormal experiences in Colorado, dealing with Native Americans. So, you know, it's I kind of view it as protection, truthfully. I mean, when they've come through for me, it's always been in a protective form.
Okay.
well, now, is your mom...
You had more Native American experiences there?
In Colorado, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We captured probably the longest EVP. I think it's even on my Facebook if you want to check it out. The longest EVP I've ever recorded. We were in a cemetery that I had some problems in previously with a spirit there that decided to go ahead and jump me. And when I went back the next day, we were recording, and in the wind, as the wind gets louder, you can hear the chanting get louder. And then as the wind dies down, the chanting dies down. So it's really it's really quite beautiful. But you can hear the chanting of the Native Americans. And I felt totally protected within that. I think that it came on the wind. And we actually went as far as to investigate that, too. A good friend of mine who lives out there and does a lot of investigating with me, Dennis Batchelor, he went all over that town just to make sure that there were no ceremonies going on or in the surrounding towns, you know, because, I mean, sound carries. So he wanted to just, you know, make sure that something wasn't going on that we were misinterpreting, because in the recording, you can there's no mistake what it is. You can hear it.
That's amazing.
It is.
So is your mom also spiritual?
Oh, extremely. Yeah.
How about her mom?
Yeah, she actually, my grandmother was very much into the Ouija board. And as a result of that, my mom had a lot of strange and bizarre experiences herself growing up. And as a result of that, we weren't allowed. You know, she completely forbid the Ouija board in our house. And she just kind of, you know, made us use our God-given talents and work with, you know, the tools that you have, because you're not using any other tools here. So, yeah, they were kind of outlawed. And, you know, I mean, I grew up respecting that. I'm like, that's fine if you're not comfortable. I mean, I didn't seem to need a Ouija board to talk to the spirits that were there. So, you know, to me, it was not really a big deal. Not a loss, anyway.
So were tarot cards forbidden as well?
No, that's actually what my mother does for a living.
Oh.
She does very well with that. So, yeah, no, that's her specialty. Absolutely. And she's also the author of A Medicine Woman Speaks by Cinnamon Moon. She's a medicine woman. So you can kind of understand with that kind of background. I mean, she's pretty open-minded.
Wow. Well, now,
Yeah.
when you moved to the farmhouse, that was in
hmm
Wisconsin, was it?
Yes.
Okay. You was about 5 when you moved there?
No, I was about 8 when we moved
When you
there.
moved there. Okay. Um,
Yeah. 5 was Colorado.
then you found out that there was spirits there at that house also. Um,
Yeah.
how did you find out that there was spirits there? I mean, were they
I
friendly?
walked in. I walked into the house and they were there.
They were
No,
sort of the
quite
welcome
literally.
wagon, I guess.
Actually, one of them was, yeah. There were several people that died in the house. One gentleman died upstairs of a heart attack. Another man was found underneath the dining room table. He had had a very violent death. He was a diabetic. There was a young woman, Eva, that was shot in the kitchen by a jealous boyfriend. There was a little girl who choked to death when she got excited because her dad came home unexpectedly from a business trip, and she was sitting at the dinner table eating, and she got, oh, daddy, daddy, but she started choking on her food, and she ultimately ended up dying. They couldn't save her.
Huh.
So, there was four deaths that we knew about, and all 4 of those deaths had active spirits with that, I actually had an opportunity to interview and meet with the arresting officer when the woman got murdered there. And he told me, his version of the story and what happened. And it kind of really answered some questions for us because there was a lot of things going on in that house. I mean, all of the typical stuff you see in the movies. It was, you walk down in the kitchen, all the cupboards are open, the noises, the lights, the sounds. I mean, it was just, and it wasn't like an everyday thing, but it pretty much was an every week thing. There was always something going on at a pretty steady pace. And I think part of that had to do with the fact that I did interact with them and I enjoyed it. I mean, quite frankly, it was a lot of fun because they weren't harmful and they weren't scary, but they did like their acknowledgement, to be sure. One thing that happened that was pretty interesting was how one night my mom and I were sitting on my bed upstairs in the upstairs of the house, and we heard this loud crashing sound. And it sounded like somebody just dumped out the cupboards or all the shelves fell and we ran running down the stairs expecting to have a big mess to clean up, And we got down there and there was nothing out of place. I mean, we couldn't figure out where that sound came from. And that happened on more than one occasion. And that's how eventually we solved that mystery by finding out about Eva, who was killed there. And she was actually doing dishes, standing at the kitchen counter when he came in and shot her through the back. And when her body hit the floor, the dishes broke. So she was found with broken dishes around her. So once you kind of get the historical facts on what was going on, all of a sudden things started making more sense. When you were sitting in the living room and, you got a couple of cats that are sitting on the couch with you, and you hear a thump upstairs right above your head, that sounds like a cat jumping off a dresser, and you would think that's had to be what it was, but the cats are sitting right here with you, and there's no other cats in the house, And then we find out later that, there was a man who rolled out of bed and was found on the floor next to the bed, and he had a heart attack. So then when you start the pieces, it's kind of like a little jigsaw puzzle. When you get the history, all of a sudden these things become explained. And once they're explained, you lose that fear. Because it somehow just kind of makes sense to you, It's like, oh, that's him.
That's him.
Yeah. How old is the farmhouse? How old is the
It's
farmhouse?
over 100. Yeah, it's over 100 years old. Yeah.
So definitely people would have died in the homes. People tend to do at that point. So people tend to forget that.
Mm-hmm.
And they think, oh, somebody's died here. Yeah, it must be haunted. Well, not necessarily, but in this case, it sounds like definitely there was some residual.
Yeah, there was definitely residual, and there was definitely intelligent. Eva was intelligent. She actually would communicate pretty regularly. You could see her. She was a solid apparition in the house. My mom experienced her as well. I had friends that would come over and experience her, and then they wouldn't come back because that wasn't your mom. It's like, no, my mom's not here. Yeah, I got to go home now. I mean, literally, I grew up with kids that like didn't want to come to my house because it was haunted, and they feared it. But for me, it was fun. You know, my mom helped me with that, though. You know, she really kind of helped me understand what was going on, and knowledge is power, and it really kind of keeps fear at a minimum. And she always kind of raised us not to live a fear-based life. You know, you got to always come from a place of love, and that just seems to work better for us.
Wow.
So I have to ask you about hauntings in a situation like this, especially when you are so sensitive to it. Do you communicate with them and ask them why they're not moving on, or are you just respecting their right to be there?
Both, depending upon the circumstances. Obviously, like when I'm investigating, you know, I'll certainly ask questions. I don't necessarily believe in that I have the power to make them cross over or anything crazy like that.
Yeah.
But I will ask them if they see the light, if they wouldn't mind walking towards it because they'd be happier there. I can, you know, suggest it. But for the most part, I kind of feel like they're where they're supposed to be. I don't think that they're necessarily not supposed to be there. Because of the dying process, I mean, once the body is dead, the spirit has to transition, okay? And that transition process is different for all of us. Some, and a lot of it's going to depend on, you know, what level your soul is at. And, you know, like an older soul is probably going to transition very quickly and smoothly, whereas a younger soul might drag their heels a little bit. They might not be quite so ready to go. They might not know they're dead. They might know they're dead and just aren't quite ready to let go of whatever it is that's here that makes them want to stay, you know? So, it's kind of like the house down the road, which, you know, that's been haunted for years. It's like it's probably some little old lady who loves her house and isn't just quite ready to leave yet. And to us, it's been haunted for 100 years. But for her, because there's no time on the other side, it's a blink of an eye. So she's only been there for, you know, in her mind, maybe a week. But in our time, you know, as far as the relevance goes, you know, it might be 50 years or 100 years. So because of the discrepancy there, I just don't really feel like it's for us to kick anybody out necessarily. I mean, you know, they have their own process and transitions to go through and their own reasons for doing it that way. You know, I have communicated with many a spouse, men who die and do not want to walk into that light until they can do it with their wife. I've been married to that woman my whole life. I love her. I'll wait right here. And they're stubborn.
Wow.
They're just digging their heels in, you know. They just, nope, we'll do this together. I'll wait right here for her. And it's like, who am I to tell them no? You know, I mean, maybe that's the way it's supposed to happen. Maybe if he left, she'd have a harder time transitioning. Maybe she's going to, you know, maybe that's where he's going to meet her. Right?
Do you think that older generations didn't have that much knowledge of the actual going to the light once they're dead, whereas now with the emergence of all the paranormal to where a lot of the people now knows about that, do you think that those who die now and see the light would go to it quicker than somebody who died generations ago?
That's a really good question. And I honestly feel like there's two different levels that you're talking about here. On a conscious level, we definitely know more. But on a subconscious level, we've known all along. So I think that, and again, it's going to depend on what level the soul is at. So if you have an old soul, say even 100 years ago, they know. They already know. You know, they know they don't have to cross over right away. They know they can cross over and come back. They don't have to wait, you know. Whereas a younger soul, you know, is going to have a little bit less experience at that transition. And so it really has nothing to do, not nothing. I would say it doesn't have as much to do with our conscious side as it does our subconscious or our soul memory.
How many of them do you think is actually afraid to go in the light?
I think it's a small percentage comparatively for all those that transition, you know. And a lot of that actually does come back to that conscious side. We were talking a little bit before the show, and you kind of touched on it, whereas, let me see, I'm getting interrupted here. I'm sorry. Spirit's trying to come through.
Oh, really? Well, they might be trying to say something that we should know.
And believe me, they'll cut right in and they'll go off on their own little tangent, and you won't even hear a skip or a beat in my voice. It'll just take over. It's funny how it works. Oh, sometimes though it's not so funny because I'm trying to get my point across, and they'll be like, "Oh, we need to interject," and then I'm like, "I'm off." So. Can you restate the question for me?
Oh.
Are you blocked? Are you blocked too? That's probably what's going on.
I don't even remember what it was.
They're like, yeah, no, we don't want.
Do you remember what it was, Barbara?
Answer that. About him being afraid to go into the light. We were talking about that.
Yeah.
Oh, the conscious and the subconscious level.
Right.
Well,
that's what we was talking about.
Yeah. Okay. Now I'm back on track. Thank you. Say, for instance, you lived a life that was not so nice. You weren't so good to people. Maybe you were horrible. Maybe to the point where you did such terrible things that you believe that you're damned to hell and you deserve it. You know, you're like, I'm going to hell. There's no question about it. I killed a man. I raped a woman. I did whatever, and I'm going to hell. If you believe you're going to hell, you're going to experience hell. That's just how that works. That is kind of an interesting thing, because when that happens and you're experiencing hell, your spirit guide is waiting for you to be done with it. They're going to go ahead and let you experience what you think you need to experience, because that's going to be part of your process. But your spirit guide is going to be with you, standing back at a distance, watching you let it play out, however long it takes. And then when you're ready and you're done punishing yourself, then you're going to continue on with your transition. So it's my understanding that hell doesn't really exist, not in the perspective that we believe it to, because all souls are ultimately restored. There is a complete rehab over on the other side, and it's again, the whole transition process is going to be very unique to each individual soul and how they live their lives and what lessons they came to learn, and some of the process is repetitive and the same, but depending upon the level of the soul, it's going to vary. Everybody gets to have their little meet and greet, but a more advanced soul won't need a meet and greet. It's like, hi, Fred, see you later. Going over here now, because that's, the next step. I mean, they can bypass it because they're not necessarily, they've done it so many times, they know what the next step is, so they'll just move ahead to that. Whereas a newer soul might take some coaxing, It might be, come on into the light, come this way. Can you feel your cluster? Can you feel your group? They're calling to you, And it might be a longer process to get them to the meet and greet where they're going to see their friends and relatives and loved ones, And then you have the fact that not all of your loved ones are necessarily in the same group. So you're going to meet your group loved ones first, and then the loved ones that are part of different groups are going to be secondary and, and third. And then once you get through that meet and greet, you're going to go into what my favorite part is the life review. And it's during the life review that the real judgment comes. But it doesn't come from God, and it doesn't come from your spirit guides or even your guardian angels. It comes from you. Because when you go through this, you're going to experience your life from everybody else's perspective. So if you brought someone love, or you made someone feel loved, you're going to feel the love that they felt. If you hurt someone, you're going to feel the pain that you caused. And this isn't a punishment or a reward. It's to gain insight and compassion, not only for them, but for yourself. So you're going to judge yourself on how well you think you did to achieve your soul's goals in coming here in the first place. And you will. You'll go through it and you'll be like, oh, God, I blew that, didn't I? And then might be something else, and you're like, oh, wow, well, hey, I did that good, And so, I mean, you'll get you'll acknowledge where your strengths and your weaknesses were. And it's, it really is. I mean, to oversimplify, it all comes down to love. It's all about the love and the compassion, and you learn that through experience. So those things that people will ask me, well, why does this have to happen? Why do people come to Earth to kill and do horrible things, And it's like, well, sometimes, we're not very good at this. We're not all great at what we're trying to accomplish here, because we're actually mixing the human being, the human mind, with a spiritual soul. There's a melding that takes place, and to try and get it to work together is tricky because we are human. We do make mistakes. We entertain our egos, and it's just part of the process. Now, as souls, we're trying to weed this out of humanity: the violence, the anger, the ego, and we're making strides. We might not see it within our lifetime, but when you see it over generations, we're making strides. We're making big strides. And in this time right now, I mean, you can see it everywhere. Everybody notices it. We're taking a big step up here. For sure we are. So we are advancing, but we're not perfect. We certainly are not. So we're gonna have to experience things from different perspectives. So by that I mean, like if in a past life I beat my wife, I'm going to come back again and experience being a wife that's been beaten. And it's not a punishment. It's to gain insight to the mistakes I've already made. Some people call that karma. But we do it wantingly and willingly. We come back to have these experiences because it's part of our growth on a spiritual level. It really is. So everything really does happen for a reason, but it's not always for us to understand why. And a lot of it is confusing to us because we come to Earth with an amnesia of sorts. Not everybody, but most people don't remember their past lives. Some do, but that's not the norm. And the reason for that is because when we come here, we need that clean slate in order to fully live out the lives we're intended to live out. And that's why I say now, with like ghosts and stuff, the non-believers go, I don't believe in ghosts. It's like, well, it's okay. You don't have to. I mean, maybe that's not for them to meddle in. Maybe they're supposed to be focusing on other things. That's okay. I mean, I'm not against people who don't believe in ghosts, but having experienced them myself, I'm certainly not going to, entertain an argument either. I mean, everybody's entitled to believe and think what they want. They all have their own path. And I respect that.
Now, if
but then, go ahead.
If you died and you say are reincarnated, the spirit that died, is it still there, or is it no longer there because it comes back reincarnated?
That's a good question. I'm going to try and explain that to the best that I can. It is my understanding that our souls, you have to realize, let me first state that it's very difficult at times to explain what is happening on the other side because there's very little point of reference here to explain it. So in this example, I'm using this example not to be literal, but just to give you a visual of what it is I'm trying to explain. Okay?
Okay.
The soul is like an orange. And when we come here, we take as many segments of that orange as we feel we need to achieve what we want to achieve. Okay? So, and each segment is an amount of energy. So we may only bring 3 slices of a segment. The rest of us is on the other side. On the other side, 3 more segments of our orange could be somewhere else. So it is possible to live multiple lives. It is possible to be in more than one place at one time. That's why when you try to communicate with the other side, say you want to talk to your grandma, or you're thinking about your mother, it's like ringing a bell. It doesn't matter whether she's reincarnated in a solar system across the world, way off, she can still come to you. Just with the thought, because it's like ringing a bell. And they love to have their acknowledgement. So if there's somebody on the other side that you want to talk to them. They can hear you, whether they've been I'm getting so much physical validation. This is a message somebody obviously needs to hear. They can hear you. Their communication may be very subtle in return. Don't dismiss it. Trust it. But whether they've been reincarnated or not, you're not interrupting them. It's not letting them rest in peace, because love is eternal. Love is eternal. Never goes away.
Now, you bring up a really good point here, because we do have people, or supposedly, that reincarnate almost immediately. And when somebody comes and asks you for a reading to contact that person, basically what you're doing is you're speaking with a fragment of that soul, correct?
That's right. Correct.
Okay. That makes sense. So that the whole soul is fragmented, sort of, so that part of the soul is reincarnated, but part of the soul is still wherever it is, and that's the communication level. Okay.
That's right. Yep. That's how you're able to astral project too. When you astral project, like if my mother's really good at it. She'll astral project into my life and call me. What are you up to? I'll be like, what makes you think I'm up to something? And she'll call me out on it. Well, just thought I'd call. I was like, uh-huh. But she has permission to peek in on me anytime. I gave her that a long time ago. She's too helpful not to allow it. But yeah, you can. That's kind of the same thing. It's just soul-to-soul communication. If I'm upset and I want my mom, I can astral project to my mother, and she knows I need her. I'll visit her in her dream, or she'll feel something funny or present. She'll feel nudged to call me, what she refers to it as often. I just felt a nudge. And I think that one of the things that makes it so easy to dismiss, and what I like to encourage people to do, is, when you're sitting there looking at a family album and I miss my mom, I wish she was still here, and oh, look, we were on family vacation, that sort of thing. You're consciously thinking about her. okay? In doing so, believe me, she knows you are. Again, love is eternal. They can feel that. But when you're doing dishes and all of a sudden your mom pops into your head and it's like, oh, yeah, Mom doesn't like it when I do this, or she likes it when I do that, or she said to stack them this way, not my way. Or, you're cooking in the kitchen and doing a recipe and all of a sudden, oh, more salt. Why did I put more salt in? I wouldn't, you get little nudges like that because they're there with you. And they pop into your head. They pop into your thoughts. That's one of the easiest ways on a conscious level for them to communicate with you is telepathically. They will put thoughts into your head. And when they pop in out of nowhere, that's usually a really strong indication that it isn't you thinking of them, it's they're near. You can also become depressed, sleepy, sad, God, I've been emotional all day. I don't know why. Well, it could be spirit energy. For me, growing up, in my especially in my 20s and 30s, I had a lot of anxiety. And I was like anybody else. Doctor gives you a pill for that, right? Calms you right down. And I was having like these full-blown anxiety attacks. And then somehow along the way, and I really kind of contributed to my great-grandmother, who is long since crossed, but the one that was a nurse, she actually takes very good care of me from the other side. But she, kind of pointed out that, well, maybe it's not maybe it's not stress. Maybe it's something else. Maybe you should, learn how to deal with it differently. Maybe it's just spirit energy, because spirit energy makes me feel anxious. That's how I know something's about to happen. That's how I know someone's near, is I start getting anxiety. Mm-hmm. So, I quit taking all that crazy medication, and I started paying attention to the anxiety, and I started using it like a tool. Work like a charm. Work like a charm. I mean, next thing I know, I'm like, yeah, about the next 15 minutes, something's going to happen. Keep your eyes open.
See, now I call that the inner voice of doom.
Mm-hmm.
Where you get that something's going to happen, but you don't quite know what, and it's in the background, and it's sort of like tension builds and builds and builds, but you have no idea what. It's just like somebody saying something's going to happen.
Yep. Yeah, I woke up one day and I couldn't breathe, and I don't have breathing problems. And I was like, oh my God, this is the strangest thing. I mean, I'm having a hard time. I can't catch my breath. I'm really having a hard time breathing. And my son and I went downtown. My granddaughter was participating in a concert. And we parked the car, walked half a block. I had to stop, bend over, try and catch my breath. And he's like, Mom, are you sure you don't want to go to the hospital? I mean, I've never seen you like this. And I'm like, you know what? Let's listen to her sing, and then we'll go to the doctor, because this is not right. Something's wrong with me. I mean, I really thought I was probably going to have a heart attack and die or something. I didn't know what was going on. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. So my granddaughter went ahead and sang, and afterwards, I started feeling better. So we're like, okay, well, let's walk through a couple shops before we head to the next town. Started walking through the shops, and I got into one of the shops, and I couldn't leave. I'm like, no, there's something here I got to buy. And I couldn't figure out what it was. There was nothing I wanted. I walked around that store 3 times. And it's just a little gift shop, and I'm like, finally, I kind of got frustrated because there was really nothing I wanted to buy, nothing at all. So I just grabbed some mints off the counter, and I went up to pay for them. I didn't even want the mints, but I had to buy something. I didn't know why. But I'm just following my instincts, right? Okay, we'll get some mints. So I get up to the counter, and the lady takes my card, and she says, oh, Gypsy Moon, that's a beautiful name. And I said, why, thank you. I'm a psychic medium. And we both stood there staring at each other with our jaws dropped. And I'm like, I normally never introduce myself that way. I'm sorry that I really didn't. I mean, I didn't know what to say for myself, And there was 2 women behind the counter. The second woman walked away. And the first woman stayed there with my card in her hand. And she said, I had a psychic reading done once, and it actually was really cool. The lady was, very spot on, and that was, So come to find out that, well, this is her telling me, proceed, right? So I did what they call, pulling a Caputo. And I ended up giving her a reading on the spot. And I said, well, are you open to receiving a message today? And she's like, yeah, I would love one. So I'm like, okay. And I said, I've been having trouble breathing all morning. And so I have a feeling that this is someone who's been having some breathing problems. And she's nodding her head. I'm like, okay. And then I just kept going with it. And, it was a man. Well, it turns out her father had died 3 days ago from lung cancer. And
wow.
I ended up giving her a yeah, right? But see, you don't, like I said, it's always putting the puzzles together, You get a piece here, you get a piece there, and you got to just keep going and follow it until you get to where you got to be. Well, he actually, the more I did the reading, the more he came through. He stepped in and took over the reading because I don't even remember all of it. But I did have my daughter-in-law there with me, and she watched my face change. Nobody ever pulls out a video for this. I'd really like to see this stuff happen for myself. But she did. She said, I almost fell down. I almost tipped over. She had to jump to kind of like catch me. And next thing I know, I was holding this woman's hand, and I felt this transference of energy that was so intense. And apparently he had been very abusive to her growing up, and she was having a real hard time forgiving him. And he needed her forgiveness. He didn't want to leave without it. So that was the whole thing of it. It wasn't really me grabbing her hand, it was him, and he literally took some of her pain. Not all of it. He couldn't get it all. But he got a lot of it. And that's what almost knocked me off my feet.
Wow.
By the time we were done, yeah, it was an incredible reading. By the time we were done, I was like, I had to go home. I think I stayed on the couch for a couple of days after that one. But she had changed her entire attitude from the beginning of the reading, where, she was angry. She was, shaking her head no, she wasn't going to forgive him, to the point where by the time we were done, she was crying and nodding her head yes, and sending him on his way, So, I mean, there was some really profound healing that took place there. And honestly, I didn't have anything to do with it. I don't look at it from that perspective, because I wasn't the one doing it. He was. He did that. He might have used me, but that's what I am. I'm the medium. I'm the in-between guy. I'm just, delivering the message. I'm not the one doing anything. That was him. Her father took on her pain. Her father gave her the love that she needed to heal. That didn't come from me. That came through me. And when I get to have experiences like that can help people, man, I'll tell you what, nothing makes me love my job more than something like that.
Wow. Now, you was talking a while ago, and you kind of answered this particular question that I had, but I thought I'd go ahead and ask it anyway again. As the years go by, we get older, as it shows in many ways on our appearance, you might say.
We get wrinkly.
Yes. So does a spirit age in their appearance?
Or
when they die, do they stay do they stay the same when they die for all time, or do they actually grow older?
Well, yeah, I was going to say there's a different color that comes with an older soul. As the soul ages, from that perspective, that's, which actually kind of makes it easy on the other side to identify the different levels. And so there's, as far as color goes, yes, they do age. But from a physical appearance, what I think is interesting is when you're on the other side, you project whatever you want to project from one to another. If you have a favorite body, you may project that body more often than others. Typically, you're going to project what you want someone to recognize or see. So if you knew your grandfather and he always looked old as far as you knew him, he's not going to project himself to you and looking like he did when he was 30, because you're not going to recognize him. You're like, who are you? You know, it might even scare you. But if you see that wrinkled old grandpa that you used to love so much, you recognize him right away, and you're not going to be fearful, you know. And that's, you know, he's going to want to be acknowledged for who he is to you.
Right.
So they have that ability to project themselves however they would be recognized. And that could be, you know, that's going to be dependent upon who is seeing them, who they want to project themselves to. So you've got that from the perspective of them projecting themselves here on Earth. But on the other side, amongst each other, they can project whatever they prefer to project. And it's different because even regardless of who you project yourself as from what lifetime, you're still going to be recognized eventually, for sure. You know, maybe not right away, but eventually those that know you by your essence. Mm. So even if you project yourself, like, say you and I died and we're on the other side and I project myself to you as a man that I used to be from another lifetime, you might not recognize me as Gypsy right away, but eventually, after maybe, you know, being around me for a few minutes, you're going to be like, oh, I know you. You used to be Gypsy too. You know what I mean? So there's that acknowledgement. You can't hide from one another. There's really no sneaky anything, because everything is so translucent. I mean, it's your intentions are there. You know, they're readable. There's really nothing to hide. No way to hide it.
Wow. Barbara, we got about 8 minutes here before we take a break. You got questions. I know you got a ton of them.
Well, I was thinking that this is probably a little like soul entanglement, and that there's tendrils or whatever that souls throughout different types of reincarnations know each other, because somehow it's kind of like, you know, quantum entanglement, you know, two elements, you know, sort of once they touch, they know each other, or they react to each other all the time.
That's right.
And
That's
this is
right.
kind of in the same way
Yes.
on a larger scale, no matter who you come back as, you know each other because it's that way.
Yeah, and I mean, our conscious mind is very limited. I mean, it is so limited. You know, we can't remember what we had for breakfast 10 years ago.
I can't remember yesterday.
Side, you have a memory of, right? Yeah, exactly. But on the other side, you have the memory of multiple lifetimes. You know, and we quite frankly can't handle that much knowledge here. You know, I mean, we're not even supposed to be looking or focusing on that necessarily, because there's other things that we're supposed to be focusing on. And most of what we're supposed to be focusing on is how to get away from the fear and onto the love. Not live a fear-based life. To face our fears, to overcome our fears, to overcome the challenges, to take the risk, take the challenge. Go for what we want. Go for what we know we need, you know, instead of being afraid to try.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you were talking before about the analysis of the person when they pass over, and there's this wonderful movie with Albert Brooks called Defending Your Life.
One of the best.
It sort of has that quality to it where, you know, you're presented with, you know, ideas of what your life was like and how you grew and what mistakes you made and what you learned from it. And, you know, from there you decide where you're going.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, we were even talking about like the suicides and stuff. With that, I always like to try and kind of compare Earth to like a college. We come here, it's like a university. And before we come, we're going to choose our courses. And when we take it in our own hands to leave early, we're choosing to drop out. And sometimes it's justifiable, and sometimes it's not justifiable. But it's it's kind of like dropping out of high school. I mean, there's nothing wrong with dropping out of high school. I mean, I don't slight anybody for doing it, but I do know that everybody that has wishes that they had just finished. They only had a couple of more years to go or a year left. They wish they would have finished. And when I've dealt with people that have taken their own lives, more times than not, they wish they would have just finished. Even some of those that were terminally ill. So there's something to be said about going ahead to finish, because if you don't finish, you're coming back. You're coming back, and you're going to still have to deal with all the things that you didn't want to deal with. You're going to be dealing with it on the other side. And then you're going to come back. It's like I just wasted this whole time. Like somebody who's 25 years old and kills themselves. It's like you just wasted 25 years because you got to come back and do it again anyway. You're going to have to redo. So
can they redo it and not kill herself the second time?
Oh, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Sure it does. People make the same mistakes over and over.
No, but I mean, if they come back to try and rectify stuff, can they this time go through life and not kill herself?
Oh, yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah, definitely. That's what you want to do. You want them to finish.
Yeah.
But we all have exit points. There's at least 3 exit points we all get. And the soul makes it. This isn't a conscious decision. Suicide's a conscious decision. But the more I study it, the more I realize that it is also an exit point. Not all the time, but sometimes it is an exit point that is given. And the soul decides when you're going to go. I mean, it's really up to the individual soul, whether you choose to leave as a child, whether you choose to leave in the middle of your life or the end of your life, if you want to live it out. But that's a decision the soul makes. So I have a profound respect for when people die, because I believe that that's when that soul has decided to make their exit, and I respect that. I don't think anybody dies too soon or too late. It was a choice that was given and made. And I respect choices. We always have free will. See, that's the thing. And some of that free will is on the subconscious side of our life.
There is a stage play called Greetings, which is one of the most fascinating plays I've ever seen. My brother starred in a production of it, so I saw several performances of it, and I've always wanted to, if I were to manage to break through and become, a filmmaker that I could choose my own projects, I would love to make this into a feature film, because it's about a family that is very dysfunctional in a comical way. It's kind of a dark comedy, but it takes place at Christmas time, and they have a mentally challenged adult son who can barely speak. He only has a few words that he's able to say, and while the other son and the other son's fiance arrive for the holidays, the mother reports that the older brother suddenly sat up and looked like he could think for a moment and said greetings, and then went back to swaying and everything. And they're like, well, maybe it was just a fluke or something. But it turns out that there is a higher being that comes in and essentially takes over the body of the older brother. It's a fascinating, and it's like I say, it takes into account a lot of these things. And the fiance, he points out that all of them have known each other for many, many lifetimes. And he lists off all the stuff that they've done, including murderers and prostitutes and thieves and bankers and all sorts of stuff, with one of my favorite lines in theater where the fiance says, what kind of prostitute was I? And he just goes, enthusiastic. But what's really powerful about this is that the fiance, her one of her baggages is that her younger sister was killed by a car when she was very, very young. And so she, not a kind of accusatory, asked her, how can you explain the death of my sister? He says, I have an answer, but you won't like it. She says, well, try me. And she says, it is possible that her death was so much of her choice before she was born than you'd want to believe. And that hits some major nerves.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of like the whole Sandy Hook shooting with all those young children. They came on a big mission, and they knew before they came what they were doing. And that incident sent a wave of love around this planet that could be felt physically by many sensitives worldwide. There were children that were getting hugs that hadn't been hugged in months. There were parents that were grateful with a gratitude they had never known. It truly was amazing, the impact on this planet in raising the vibration that those children had. And their purpose did not go unnoticed. I mean, it truly did not. And a lot of people have a hard time understanding it from that perspective, because it's always deemed as such a loss when a child dies. But you have to really, take comfort in knowing that soul made that decision for a reason. And even though you don't understand the reason, and it might not make sense, you really have to respect their choice to play that role, and it goes beyond the innocence of a child too, even the people we think that shouldn't even deserve to be here because they're horrible people, in an odd kind of way, I have to respect them for coming because they're bringing with them lessons. They agreed to play the bad guy in this play. We need the bad guys. We actually need them because this isn't heaven. This is a learning ground. This is where we get our lessons. We take our licks.
Okay, it's break time. We're going to go ahead and take us a break, and we'll be back in about 4 or 5 minutes, something like that. Just your phone will be live, so just don't say anything. And Jeff, you want to take us out?
Yep. You're listening to the Paranormal View on para-x.com with host Henry Foister, Ceiling Cap Barbara Duncan, and myself, Jeffrey Gould, with tonight's guest, Gypsy Moon. So stay tuned for more Paranormal View after the break.